Thank you so much to Jake, Panos, and Alo for that interesting conversation. So nice to see the change that's happening through music. It's really incredible. Next on this stage is the fiber optic era, shaping the sustainable future of connectivity. This discussion is sponsored by AT&T, and it will dive into how their network transformation is benefiting the environment and much more. So please welcome to the stage Seana Smith and Shannon Carroll.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you here. We're going to dive into a very important topic here this afternoon, the sustainable future of connectivity and how sustainability is really top of mind for AT&T as you do transition from copper to fiber and wireless networks. So join me in welcoming Shannon Carroll. He's the AVP of Global Environmental Sustainability with AT&T. And Shannon, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Happy to be here. I'm glad everybody here is interested in the copper to fiber transition.
You know, it's hard to turn that topic down, as you can see. All right, well, Shannon, let's just dive into it. And let's just start bigger picture here. When you talk about the implementation here of fiber optic networks, talk to us about that transition and how it's helping AT&T reach its sustainability goals.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is to talk about the sustainability goals. One of our flagship goals is to be carbon neutral by 2035 across our operations. That's a really important goal for us. It's directly within our control. And when you look at our greenhouse gas emissions associated with that, it's largely purchased energy. That is a big part of it. So when you talk about that copper to fiber transition, and you look at the fact that when we're able to switch a neighborhood from copper to fiber, we experience about a 70% reduction in energy consumption. So think about that, a 70% reduction in energy consumption. That directly helps us meet our carbon neutral goal. I believe I have these numbers right. In 2022, 2023, just 2 years of decommissioning data, and that's largely, when I say decommissioning, I mean transitioning from copper to fiber. You know, that's 2 million megawatt hours in reduction in energy usage. So that's really, really big, really impactful. Another thing we lean in heavily on is climate resilience at AT&T. We have a big physical network that's susceptible to severe weather events. Fiber is just more climate resilient. It's just more resilient to extreme weather than copper is. So that's a very powerful combination.
And talk to us about some of the most compelling arguments, some of those that you laid out there for stakeholders right now to support this shift and maybe what you need or what's necessary in order to get that message out there for wider adoption.
Well, the value proposition is clear. I mean, fiber is faster, it's more durable, it's more energy efficient. That's what our customers want. There's very few customers who still use copper, but there are some obligations we have in terms of maintaining copper over fiber, and we want to make sure we are transitioning to that copper, not only for all the reasons we already discussed, but that's what our customers are demanding as well. You know, policy is going to be really important here, smart policy. You know, we work with at both the local and the state legislation levels to do that. We work, you know, hand in hand with pretty much every state legislature that you can think of, including California. We recently did a public-private cooperation with them, laying fiber in certain parts of the state that didn't have it. So all that's going to be really important.
How critical is that cross-sector partnerships, cross-collaboration when you talk about the private sector, the public sector working together in order to reach that mass widespread adoption?
Right, it is absolutely vital when you think about collaboration. I mean, AT&T can't do this alone. We need industry groups. We need, obviously, we mentioned kind of government groups as well. We need NGOs. We need everybody involved in that. You know, when you think about the fact that copper is being stolen, right? We hear about it all the time, and it's going from kind of petty theft to almost an organized crime type of thing. You know, the copper that we can reclaim and the copper that we do reclaim is 100% recyclable. I mean, that's less copper we have to mine for. I mean, that's the whole idea of circularity for those of us who embrace that as a concept, and hopefully we all do. And we can put that copper right back into the global supply chain. We talk about AI and data centers and healthcare and all these other industries that really need a vast amount of copper. You know, we can be part of that solution.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit more about that demand and I guess your approach to recycling that copper, how you identify it, how that process works.
So, I mean, there's lots of copper historically that's been there. So what we're trying to do is identify where we no longer need copper and where we no longer need copper. And that's mainly being driven by customer demand. They're letting us know where we don't need that copper. and then obviously we get that, we recycle it, and then it's figuring out, and again, this is not solely an AT&T problem, it's working across the industries to figure out where do we need this copper the most, right? Because what we don't want to do is pick winners and choosers, so to speak. We want to make sure that we're getting this copper to really where it needs to be, what industries need it, and there's a lot of demand for it.
Are you able to meet that demand, or?
Not by ourselves, no. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody who has, there's a lot of other carriers, but there's a lot of other industries that use copper as well. I think we all need to take a step back and look at what copper aren't we using? Can we get to that copper in an environmentally responsible way? And then when we do get to it, we have to recycle 100% of it, and that's the only way we're going to meet the global supply or the global demand for copper.
And a shift like this, it faces environmental challenges, I would assume, logistical challenges, another thing that I'm sure is top of mind. How is AT&T navigating that?
Well, there's a lot to navigate. I think, for us, it's the best thing we can do is be a good steward in terms of the environment and how responsibly, not only copper, but everything that we do, right? So you think about a big company like AT&T and all the technology that it takes to run our network. We are committed to handling all of that in an environmentally responsible way, not just the copper. So, but again, we believe there's lots of opportunities here. So again, when you talk about that 70% reduction, that's something that we experience. There is going to be a version of that others experience as well. So that energy efficiency is not going to just be realized by AT&T. It's going to be realized all over. And as many of us have heard, there's a big focus on AI, not just at Climate Week, but altogether. I'm an optimist. I believe that all technologies become more efficient over time. But when you look at the fact that AI does have such high energy consumption demands, don't we want that running over fiber, which is 70% more efficient than copper? And that's part of the equation as well.
When you talk about the benefits, and you've laid out a number of benefits so far this afternoon, one thing that we haven't really taken a chance to talk about yet is the benefit to underserved areas, rural areas. Talk to us about that and how this transition then better serves those areas.
Sure, I think in two ways. So AT&T has a very aggressive commitment to helping close the digital divide. I think it makes sense. It's close to what we do as a company, and we want to make sure everybody has access to high broadband connectivity. And at the end of the day, we're a connectivity company. So where we can take out that copper and replace it by fiber, part of that equation is making sure everybody has connectivity, but everybody has high-speed connectivity. That's really, really important. It's not just the connectivity. And then again, when you look at the resiliency of the fiber over the connectivity, I believe as we're closing the digital divide, we want to do that in a way that where all of those lines, all those new fiber lines are resilient to extreme weather events. We do a lot in terms of climate resiliency. We use climate data over the last 6-7 years that we get from Argonne National Lab. So when we site new locations to put either wireless or fiber, we actually use climate data to help inform those decisions. And I do think that's part of closing the digital divide as well.
And speaking of data, I guess, what metrics do you use, or how do you measure the success of some of these sustainability efforts?
So some of them are easier than others, as you can imagine. Very traditionally, greenhouse gas inventory is going to get you a long way in terms of some of these, and we're very transparent how we do that. So as we say we're going to be carbon neutral over our operations, that's all in the public domain. We get that validated by an independent third party. One thing that's very interesting that has a fiber connection as well is we're leaning into what we call smart climate solutions. And the idea is that just like AT&T has a carbon neutral goal, a lot of these other companies, all the companies you've heard of, they have net zero or carbon neutral goals. So they're coming to AT&T and saying, hey, can you provide us products and services that are net zero, that are carbon neutral? And what allows us to do that is fiber, right? And so when we talk about reducing our business customers' emissions, we're also very transparent in the way that we do that as well. But there's a lot of wireless, a lot of IoT, but fiber is part of that equation as well.
What are some of the lessons that you've learned during this process, during your career, and especially when you've been working focused on sustainability, that you think can be used across industries and far beyond just the telecommunication industry?
So from my perspective, transparency is everything. You have to let folks know what you're doing. You have to report on what you're doing. And again, I'll just go back to an example I provided earlier around smart climate solutions, and the goal that we have around that is actually called Gigaton. We're going to reduce 1 gigaton of emissions for our customers. That's all in the public domain. The calculations are there, the case studies are there. So it's for everybody to see and review. I think it's also really important to work with independent third parties when you do this. And again, collaboration is going to be key. We work with lots of really good industry groups. We work with a lot of good NGO partners, a lot of good, again, private public partnerships, and you have to do all of that together. It has to be an all-in approach, and you have to be transparent.
What would you say, and I'm sure it's hard to narrow this list down, but what is the biggest, or what are the top sustainability challenges that you face today, or you think we face today, that need to be addressed?
So there's a long list of sustainability challenges. I think there's a lot of work to do still in terms of circularity, the circular economy, the idea of once you're done with something, somebody else can use that. Copper is a perfect example of that. There's a lot of work to do around that and getting the right frameworks. I think, meeting the energy demand, and not just AI, but for all the reasons. The last panel was about music. Digital music is, that requires a lot of ability to send out over fiber optic lines as well, requirements. So I think, energy use is going to continue to be a big deal. Renewable energy has to play a part of that. There's technologies like hydrogen that we're all waiting for, and hopefully that can help solve some of the problems. But I honestly think if I take a step back and just think selfishly from what I do from a day-to-day basis, and again, electricity being so important to running a network, I think we have to get our national grid right. I think we need to do more on long-duration energy storage. So, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, but if you can put that into batteries, long-duration batteries, that solves a lot of the problems. So that's what I would say.
Shannon, people become more open, or I guess how have the conversations changed and beyond the walls of AT&T when you're out there, when you're looking for partnerships, when you're trying to get the message out there? Are people more receptive to the idea now? And I guess what does that signal, do you think, about wider adoption and where this industry is going to be over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
I'm very optimistic. I can tell you that about 7 years ago when we started doing our climate resiliency work, and that is highly dependent on getting our hands on the best available data, and we believe we do that through a collaboration with the Department of Energy and Argonne National Labs. We actually went out and talked to folks about, hey, do you guys want to work with us? We felt, there are a lot of companies who want to do what we're doing, and there wasn't a big appetite. Now you fast forward to today, AT&T, FEMA, and Department of Energy through the Argonne National Labs, we've launched actually a climate tool that's publicly available for everybody. It's called Climber. I highly recommend it. So if you're, the main audience is, those who are working on local municipalities on hazard mitigation plans, but anybody can use it. Anybody can get access to some of the best climate data in the world. And so I think that is just an indication that more and more collaboration is coming. I think this is just the beginning, but it is collaboration. Our Chief Sustainability Officer, Charlene Lake, says all the time, it doesn't help us to be climate resilient in a vacuum. We need everybody to be climate resilient. I think you can make that argument for almost every part of environmental sustainability. And I do think environmental sustainability, and the large umbrella of that would include climate change, that is a very collaborative space as of today.
And Shannon, you've been with AT&T for a number of years. We won't say exactly how many.
25.
But when you've seen this transition take place, the new strategies come in, I guess, what has that changed? What has that been like from your perspective? And what do you hope, or where do you see this conversation being over the next few decades?
I don't think we're unique. I think, maybe 10, 15 years ago, although AT&T has for a very long time, probably within that time frame, been reporting their greenhouse gases, making sure we're looking at water, waste, things of that nature, the traditional things that are still really important. We were doing all of that. But I don't think there's an expectation internally or externally that we'd be the 5th largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the United States. I don't think there's an expectation that we'd be launching climate data with FEMA and Argonne National Labs. I don't think there's an expectation that we'd be working with our business customers to reduce a gigaton of emissions. So I think there's just a natural maturation that has taken place over those years. I don't really hear any skepticism anymore. The only skepticism that comes is, how are we going to pay for it? That is a really important question, and especially in a corporate environment, I think it's okay to say that. As we kind of educate folks and try to deliver our message as simply as possible, the economics have to work, and so I think for those of us who work in environmental sustainability, we do have an advantage that traditional ROI is a bit easier to make on the environmental side. So I fully lean into that, and I compete for capital at AT&T just like everybody else does based on a good business case.
Shannon Carroll, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.